Irish Breakdown Nation, happy Sunday. We are coming to you live with another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast and another edition of a commitment show, because Notre Dame this weekend has landed not one, not two, but three wide receivers in the class of 2026, and they capped off this weekend by getting wide receiver Brayden Robinson out of Red Oak, Texas.
Yeah, man.
Brian, this is another big pickup for Mike Brown. It's another big pickup for the class. I'm happy to be here with you guys to talk about this. As usual, you guys know how we get down. We're going to talk about Brayden Robinson. We're going to talk about the commitment. We're going to talk backstory, class impact. We're going to dive into the film because, of course, we got to watch this electric player on film, man. And we're going to tie it all up in a bow at the end. But this is a huge pickup. We're talking about a 4-star wide receiver, 4-star graded by Irish Breakdown, Rivals, ESPN, 247 Sports. He was also in the ESPN top 300 players in the 2026 class. So, Brian, this is another big explosive weapon for Mike Brown and this Notre Dame offense.
Oh, it's big. I mean, look, I'm going to have some things to say about Brayden as we dive into it, because I've been a little back and forth on him for a lot of reasons. Part of it being, you know, he just was a guy that I just was unsure. Would there be room because of the fact that he was always going to be the last to commit? He was the guy that was scheduled to commit last, and it was like, you know, hey, where are they going to be, and you know, those type of things, and you know, would they go to 5? There were all these different things, but you looked at it and said, but man, if you're going to add a 5th kid to this class, you better add somebody electric, and Brayden Robinson is certainly that. We're going to have some fun breaking down his film and how he performs and all those other kind of things. And it's going to be entertaining to kind of look at the film and really talk about Brayden. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, this is a kid that you know, I mean, just you get to the point where it's like you need speed, you need playmakers, and this kid's a playmaker, and he's got a very interesting backstory just for himself. Not interesting backstory, but just kind of how he became a big time player. He was already kind of a heavily recruited kid early on because he was really fast. Had a pretty good sophomore year. I think he had over 40 catches, 600 yards, and he, as a sophomore in 2023, he was a complimentary, like, number 2 player to a guy at his high school named Taz Williams. Notre Dame fans who are who follow recruiting really a lot are going to remember the name Taz Williams, because Notre Dame hosted Taz, and they offered Taz. I think they hosted Taz, and they offered him a scholarship. Never really went anywhere, but they're familiar with the name. He ends up signing with Baylor, but Taz as a senior, so this would be Brayden's junior year. Taz goes into the senior year. He's coming off a 1,000-yard season. He's supposed to be the number 1 player. Brayden is going to be sort of the number 2 receiver for the class in there. It's already team captain, though. And then Taz Williams gets hurt. He hurts his knee in the 2nd game of the year. And Brayden was good his first 2 games, but once Taz went down, Brayden then went off. He had to kind of become that number 1 player, and he stepped into that role quickly and impressively, Trevor, and then goes out as a junior and just has a monster season. You know, I said followed up his 46 catches for 868 yards and 8 touchdowns as a sophomore, with a 79-catch season where he had 1,408 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns, and was just an electric weapon. Also has had at least one 70-plus yard kick return in each of his last 3 seasons. So he's also a dynamic returner. And this is a kid who's got 10.4 speed in the 100-meter dash. He's electric. I mean, he's just an impact football player, and the kind of guy that you get to the end of the day, you say, if we're trying to get faster as an offense, if we're trying to add more dynamic playmakers to the offense, how do you turn a kid like this down? And we'll get into some of the stuff about the height and different things like that. But the fact of the matter is the speed is such and the playmaking is such that you just look at the film and say, if we can't figure out what to do with this kid, then, you know, maybe we're not the coaches we think we are. So at the end of the day, Notre Dame decided, like, look, we can't say no to this kid just because he's committing last in the order. Like, we got to take this kid, and they decided that Brayden and Devin and Caden were all part of if it's the right 5, you bring him in, and Brayden, obviously, he was the 5th to commit publicly. to this group. But, you know, as we get into the backstory, we'll talk more about that, Trev. But this is just a big pickup and just one that you'd be excited about. And then I also think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Texas impact of this commitment too, Trevor, because it is really impressive what Notre Dame is doing in the state of Texas this year. And I mean, this is commit number 4 in this class from the state of Texas, 3rd on offense. He obviously joins Javion Osborne, Caden Finley, who committed the other day, and then, of course, Tiki Hola, who committed to Notre Dame back in May. So 4th kid out of the state of Texas. And as we've talked about a lot of times, Notre Dame is trying to make Texas a big part of what they're doing. And landing Brayden Robinson is just another step in that direction. You've now added 2,000-yard receivers and a running back that as a sophomore went over 2,000 yards from the state of Texas. That's big-time recruiting right there.
It's a perception-changing class, without a doubt. We're talking about another recruitment where Mike Brown out-battled other premier schools for another elite receiver out of the state of Texas. Look, some people will look at who this came down to, and Brayden Robinson's commitment came down to Notre Dame, Arizona, and Miami. And to some, that might not turn a lot of heads, but let me remind you what 2 receivers were at Miami and Arizona last year. Tet McMillan at Arizona and Xavier Restrepo at Miami. And
and that's why he's looking at Arizona, right? It's because of what they did with Tet McMillan. Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're talking about a team whose leading receiver had 598 yards in a 16-game season. That recruiting coach was able to sit down with Brayden Robinson, go through a commitment process, and at the end of the day on July 6th, came out with his commitment.
Yep. Then this commitment 25 in the class. They're 2 away from being completely done. But when you look at like the finalists, Trev, I do think Miami is a big-time school to beat. I mean, especially since Miami's throwing money around. And there was a time when some people thought Miami might be trending well with him, but it was funny coming out of the visit talking to Miami people. They're like, yeah, we don't think we're going to get him. And so it was very interesting how that all went down. But look, you beat Miami for a kid they want. You beat Texas for a kid they want. You beat Clemson for a kid they want. That's the runners-up of the last 3 receivers that Notre Dame got. They beat Texas and Texas A&M for Caden Finley. They beat Clemson and UCLA for Devin Fitzgerald, and then they just beat Miami for Brayden Robinson. That's how you get it done, right? And you got to go toe-to-toe with the best teams, the teams that tend to produce a lot of NFL receivers and skill players, and you went toe-to-toe with them and beat them all. That's huge. Because, I mean, we're talking about a year where Miami was the #1 scoring offense in college football last year.
Oh, yeah.
Their quarterback was the number one overall draft pick. Believe me, I've talked to people around that program. They wanted Brayden Robinson. It's just that they got beat by Notre Dame for him. So this is a really big pickup for the Irish. There's no question about it. And just another, like I said, another feather in the cap for Mike Brown for what he's been able to do to put this class together and silence some of the doubters. And look, some of the doubt was understandable. I'm not like out here to throw shade like, you know, oh, all you losers that curse. I mean, I get it. I thought it was over the top at times, but it was one of the things where, look, you got to show that you can recruit at an elite level at a place like Notre Dame. And I think Mike Brown's shown you that he has the tools to get that done, especially when you consider, Trev, like you were just talking about, Notre Dame played 16 games last year, 16 games. And they had a grand total of 0 receivers to get to 600 yards last year. And you beat out a team that had the #1 offense in the country last season statistically. Yeah. And I'm looking it up now because I know Miami was also not just #1 overall, but I know they were very high in passing offense. Yet #3 passing offense in the country last year, passed for over 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns last season. And that's the offense that Notre Dame just beat to get Brayden Robinson. So who also had a sort of a proof of concept that they can use a small receiver who's really electric and dynamic to go make plays because, I mean, you know, he didn't have a great 40 time, but Xavier Restrepo is not exactly the biggest guy in the world.
No.
And he was a pretty dynamic player at Miami. So just a really big, just 3 straight really big recruiting wins. And I was glad that Brayden admitted, you know, what we knew, which is there's a reason he moves to commit him up to July 6th. They planned this out. They planned this out after their official visit.
Well, Brian, to touch on your point about the finalists that it came down to, his offer list is also really impressive. I mean, it
Oh, yeah.
wasn't just Notre Dame and Miami and Arizona that were interested in Brayden Robinson. We're talking about a kid who had offers from Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, LSU, Oregon, Tennessee, Ole Miss. I mean, that's a pretty impressive offer list. And for Notre Dame to just be one of the finalists and a legitimate finalist, and then obviously to end up with the commitment is huge. Now, I know we're getting ready to dive into backstory here, Brian, but before we do, I wanted to touch on something here really quickly because we've talked a lot about perception and what this recruiting class means. But to get a receiving class, a five-man receiver class with people like Bubba Frazier and Caden Finley and Devin Fitzgerald, now Brayden Robinson, Dylan Faison, who's been committed for a while. What does this actually mean? What does this truly mean for Notre Dame moving forward?
Well, I think it sends a message that Notre Dame doesn't have to. Notre Dame can be a dominant recruiting force on the recruiting trail at any position now, and it's not just positions where they were good last year. Like, look, they weren't great at receiver last year, at least in ways that are going to attract recruits. I mean, you and I have talked about, look, the film for Jaden Rayhouse is better than his numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not a recruitment where you got this really sexy pass-heavy offense that can just really sell kids. It just goes to show that what this staff is doing can have great reach. And, we looked at, obviously they got a good quarterback early in the process, great running back class already, great tight end class, deep, talented offensive line class. The defensive line class is on the verge, if they can finish Elijah Golden, of having, arguably its best defensive line class in a decade. The secondary class is elite. The linebacker class is really good. Like, you look at it and say, okay, but can the receiver class finish? And that was the one you're like, I don't know, man. Like, you didn't throw the ball well last year. You haven't really been a great throwing team, and since 2021. And I don't know that there's a lot of recruits that remember the glory days of Jack Cohn and Ian Book. When you look at the success they had with Ian all the way back in 2018 and the Jack Cohn in 2021, but other than those years, this team hasn't thrown the ball a whole lot. And yet they can still go beat Texas for an in-state kid at wide receiver. They can go beat Miami for a Texas kid. Miami's always had success recruiting Texas over the years. And then, of course, beat Clemson for a kid that they wanted, out of Arizona. So I think what it shows is, Mike Brown can recruit. And obviously, as we say with every kid, it's always a staff effort. It's always a staff effort. But the position coach has got to lead these recruitments. And that's what Mike Brown has done. And I think he showed that when he's allowed to have a bigger say in the evaluation process and who they go after and all these different things, you see it come together pretty well. They've got different types of receivers. They've got, a great all-around guy like Caden Finley. You've got a couple really dynamic guys. You've got more of a bigger, possession type of guy, and Devin Fitzgerald, and then Dylan Faison, who's also a little bit of a jack of all trades type of athlete. And it fits well together. And they're kids that fit Notre Dame. I mean, Brayden Robinson is a very good student. He was also a team captain as a junior. All these kids, if you guys knew the academic situation for these five receivers, you'd be like, hold on a second. I thought the stereotype is that, Southern athletes weren't like that. And you're like, yeah, they are. They always have been. Just Notre Dame was never able to get them. And these guys are all perfect examples. But I also think it shows an intentionality in what they were trying to do in this class. They had to make a statement at wide receiver. And no, they didn't get any, right now, 5-star, top 10 overall player type of guys. I don't care about that. It's nice to have those guys, but we've seen teams also be very good without those guys. This is the kind of dynamic recruiting class that really polishes off this offensive class in really impressive fashion. It shows that Notre Dame is a legitimate recruiting force right now at every position. I mean, you could argue that linebacker ranks at the bottom of Notre Dame's position groups right now. I mean, somebody's got to be last. You could sign the number one class in the country and no one else is even close to you. Somebody's got to rank last. This isn't meant to say that the linebackers aren't good. I'm actually saying the opposite, that a class with Thomas Davis Jr., a 4-star borderline top 100 recruit, and a class with Jacoby Clapper, a 4-star top 250 caliber recruit, is considered your quote-unquote bottom-ranked position group class. Well, it probably would have been receiver 4 days ago. And now it's linebacker, which just speaks volumes to how good this class is. Because like I said, you go win the national championship next year and you win every game by 50. If you're doing a ranking in this season, somebody's got to be last, and it speaks volumes that you're in that position. And now the receiving class can say, hey, look, we just bagged a really good one, like a really good one. And now we're a force to be reckoned with.
Couldn't agree more, Brian. I could not agree more. For those of you that just joined us, we are covering Brayden Robinson's commitment, 4-star wide receiver out of Red Oaks, Texas. Brian, let's dive into the backstory and what all went into this. Some of this was, like you mentioned, Brayden Robinson brought it up. It's kind of planned, moving the commitment date up. But what all, from start to finish, went into this one?
Well, I mean, this is a kid that Notre Dame's been on for a while, Trev, and it's not one that is overly dramatic, other than there just were some question marks along the way. He's a kid that got an offer last year on the pot of gold. Notre Dame had been recruiting him for a while. They got him on campus, in January for official visit. Got him back in April for the 1st of January was an unofficial visit. Got him back for an unofficial visit in April. And it was just one of those things where it just was a slow, just build the relationship, get to know the young man, and see if he's a fit. And he definitely was early on as a young man. I think that fit really well. And then early on, it was really an Ohio State Notre Dame battle. And there was a time when people thought, like, okay, it's going to be one of the two. Well, then Ohio State's class kind of filled up a lot earlier than Notre Dame's, and Brayden wasn't in commitment mode. And I don't think that he really looked at either school as like, okay, I'm definitively want to go there. He was still early in the process. He wanted to play it out, really took a methodical approach to this, got to a lot of different schools, tried to go back to places. Like, he took an unofficial to Miami, then took his official to Miami, just really trying to be smart and thorough and get out and make sure that you see all the schools that you want to see. And that was kind of the process. It came down at the end more so to Notre Dame and Miami. And Arizona was in there, but it was really going to be a Notre Dame and Miami battle. And then it was just kind of staying firm. The only kind of uncertainty was, and I've said this on the boards, was I was torn on having Brayden Robinson in my projected class because, I was told early on that, like right now, the goal is to get to 4. We'd go to 5 for the right guy. Well, I could never get a good answer on, well, who would you take as the 5th? Because other than Caden Finley, and we knew at the time that Brayden Robinson was going to be a later commitment date. And so there was just uncertainty, and the uncertainty was like, literally, I don't know if other guys want to jump on board, if they're going to wait for him. And there was the time where Cohen Brown looked like he was really leaning towards Notre Dame, and we obviously felt good about where Caden Finley was for a while. And then once they turned the heat up on Devin Fitzgerald, there just were some other guys who were just like, is there going to be room for Brayden at the end of the day? And what the staff decided was yeah, there will be. And so that's kind of, so going into the official visit, I was uncertain of, honestly, where Brayden stood with Notre Dame. And again, there's two types of uncertainty. One is I've heard from people, and I don't know if they like him as much as maybe people think they do. The other type of uncertainty is I just can't get an answer that really tells me where things stand. And I think that my sources were being intentionally vague because there was a lot to play out. There was a lot to kind of see, like, okay, where are we with this kid? What does he think of us? Where are we? I know we hear this, we hear that, but where are we? And the staff got a chance to sit down with Brayden during the official visit and see where his head was at. And it was obvious that he was feeling Notre Dame in a big way. And they were like, okay, let's do this then. And they actually took his commitment that weekend. So what's funny is Brayden's the 5th receiver to commit publicly, but he actually committed before the other 2. And so that's when you knew, you're like, okay, so like the next day, I think I added an update about him where it's like, okay, now I feel really, really good about where things stand, because I'm not going to say that the kid committed, because that's his moment to have and his news to break, as you guys know. But it was interesting that he actually committed first to the staff. But that's also why he moved his commitment date up to July 6th. And so we hinted about that for about a week before he actually made the decision to move it up. But this is one where you felt good about it ending for Notre Dame. Now, kids can always change their mind. And a lot of people felt that, you know, there was another D tackle that we thought, Michigan people thought, everybody thought was going to go to Notre Dame. And last minute, he changes his mind. From what I'm told, there was no, once Brayden made his decision, there was no second guessing. But what was interesting is Notre Dame, for a while, there was uncertain of how Brayden felt about them. And I was having people saying, like, hey, have you heard anything? Like, what is your read on this? And you know, what about this? And what about that? And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting, because I'm talking to people around the Miami program, and they're like, yeah, he's not coming here. He's probably going to Notre Dame. That's what Miami people were saying coming out of his visit on the week before the Notre Dame visit, was like, yeah, he's going to Notre Dame. Then going into the Notre Dame visit, I think there was some uncertainty. So I think Brayden played this pretty close to the vest, and the Miami people feeling the way they did wasn't because he told them. It was just when they're talking to him and they're having their heart-to-hearts, it just became obvious that his heart was somewhere else. And obviously Notre Dame was able to see that during the visit, and that's why that move happened so quickly. Is I think he knew, and then once Notre Dame realized that he was serious about this and he really wanted to be here, they were like, yeah, we'll take you, knowing that, okay, now we're going to 5, and he's the kind of kid that we want to have. So that, you know, it's not a like, wow, that was earth-shattering type of thing, but there was a little bit of intrigue down the stretch with him, because I do think there was a little bit of uncertainty about just where they stand with him. And then, because the concern was going to be, well, what if he waits to commit and there's some other guys on the board? Do we have to turn some guys down? Are we going to take – like, how's this process going to play out? And then it worked out perfectly to where Brayden was able to make that decision. So that's why I say there's two things we as fans have to understand is the timing with which certain players announced they got an offer does not mean that was the order in which Notre Dame gave the offer. And then the timing with which a kid commits publicly is not always the order in which they actually committed. This isn't the first time this has happened. Rodney Dunham committed to Notre Dame privately before Ebenezer Utade did, but Rodney committed afterwards publicly. Because remember, Ebenezer committed the weekend before Rodney had his commitment during the week. So I think he committed on April 5th or 6th, and then Rodney committed on 4th or 5th, and then Rodney committed on the 10th of April, even though Rodney was the one that was pushing to get Ebenezer in the class with him. So it's interesting how this can play out sometimes. So Brayden actually committed to Notre Dame before the two kids that committed yesterday. We just wasn't public yet, and it's a big pickup. So that's the backstory on how this one all came to be.
I do always love hearing the backstories of these. And one thing that I've noticed just through this weekend is all three of the players that they picked up, this was a very methodical process for all three. It sounds like it was very thought out. It was a very thorough process. No decisions were made overly emotionally. Obviously, where you choose to go to college for the next 4 to 5 years is somewhat of an emotional decision. But I also don't think it's a coincidence that two of the guys had NFL players as fathers, and the third one, his father's his high school head football coach. Very well thought out, all three very well spoken. But you've brought it up.
I think that also helped Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Because they were kind of like, how do we want this class to look? You know, there were some guys that they liked early. I mean, the list of guys that they would have taken early was like 8 or 9 guys. And so you find out kind of early on, well, we're not sure who we want to definitely push for. Some guys wanted to make early decisions. Notre Dame did want some of those guys. For others, they weren't really ready to commit to them. So I think this also allowed Notre Dame to allow its own process to play out with this recruiting class. So the fact that these young men were kind of methodical, and Caden and Brayden more so, Devin Fitzgerald's kind of happened really fast. But with like Caden Finley, like, it's interesting, Trev, that you mentioned it, because there's 2 commitments that just kind of happened real quick. Bubba Frazier and then Devin Fitzgerald. Like, they got offered, and within a month they were committed. And then there are these two, the 2 Texas kids, were much longer processes. I mean, over a year, these recruitments went on. And I think that allowed Notre Dame to kind of sift through things to find out who do we really want, who really fits here, and didn't have to kind of panic early on to go to see who they wanted, because the board was much bigger early on, and they didn't have to panic and rush and freak out and that type of thing. They could stay the course and offered some other kids as the process went on, but then they end up with this 5-man class of really talented football players. You get 2 kids from Texas, 1 kid from Georgia, 1 kid from Florida, and 1 kid from Arizona. So you're definitely hitting some of those states where you're seeing a lot of athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely about the right fit in the class. We know that Marcus Freeman has said that quite a bit. So let's talk about Brayden Robinson's fit and his impact in the 2026 class. You've mentioned it. He is now the 25th commitment in the 2026 class, the 16th offensive commit in this class. And I know we've talked about it a lot throughout this weekend, but Brian, Notre Dame needed a big push for this offensive class, and it looks like they got the job done.
Oh, they did. I mean, just big picture with the class impact, Trev. I mean, last year's offensive class, it wasn't small by any stretch, but it was, it wasn't the kind of like big time, like, wow, knock your socks off kind of class. I mean, you had the weird, and it just was a process that left a lot of bitter taste in people's mouths. I mean, you had the quarterback that flipped, you had the really strange receiver recruiting where, like part of the staff's putting all their chips into Derek Meadows. The other part of the staff, they want Dylan Robinson and Jalen Cooper and Dalen McCutcheon. And there's all these crossed wires, and it looks like you're going to get Dylan Robinson. And then he last minute kind of changes his mind and goes a different direction. It looked like you're going to get Tanook Hines, and then he kind of changes direction. It was just a very strange recruiting process. And, you had a tight end early. Remember, people forget this. Nate Roberts was one of the first players to commit to Notre Dame in the 2025 class, the tight end from Oklahoma. And then he backs out later because he wanted to be the only tight end in the class, and they wanted to still add James Flanagan. And so they were like, no, we're still going to take James Flanagan. And then, of course, the offensive line class was smaller and then they added Cam Herron late. It just was a weird process. And it was a good offensive class. It was not a bad offensive class by any stretch. If you get Nolan James Jr. and Blake Hebert and James Flanagan and Elijah Burris and Scrap Richardson and Will Black and Matty Augustine and Owen Streebig and the Cam Herron and Jerome Bettis Jr., that's not a bad class at all. That's a good class. But it wasn't the kind of class where you say, but is that the class you're building a championship on the shoulders of? It wasn't that. There are players that are part of that, but it wasn't that sort of foundational class. This class is looking more like that, which now allows last year's class to kind of complement this year's class in ways that you really like. And now you look at it and say, okay, this is the kind of class that if you can coach it, has a lot of the pieces that you want in sort of that type of class. I mean, elite running back class, elite tight end class, now a big-time receiver class, a very strong offensive line class that was more interior-oriented after last year's class that had 3 tackles and a center. It's like really – and that class is a little too interior-centered until what? Until the end when they added, Grayson McHugh and Charlie Tom. So just the way that this one put together, there was so much more organization to this class. The way it got put together, it was more methodical. It was more process. It was more, we're staying on point. We're not going to overreact and get off course. We're going to stay on point. And they were able to put it together. So obviously finishing it off with Brayden Robinson, as a class is huge. And then, of course, there's the receiver aspect, Trev. And we talked about this in the last 2 classes. 4 was the desired number. They would go to 5 if it was the right guys. Well, guess what? Brayden Robinson was part of that. He's the right 5. And now this, I'm saying I believe this to be true, but I'm not 100% certain on this. Part of the reason I think they also went to 5 was I believe Caden Finley was the last to actually commit to the staff. And now, having said that, when they took Brayden Robinson, they felt very good about where they were with Devin Fitzgerald and Caden Finley. So they knew there was a very good chance they're going to get to 5. And that's why there was no, from what I was told, there was no questions about, did they want to take Brayden Robinson? It was just about, do they want to push for him if he's not necessarily feeling them as much? And by the time the visit was over, that obviously was, that was answered loud and clear. So receiver class, you get your 5. You've completely restocked it numbers-wise. No question about that. You've now signed 8 receivers in a 2-year class. And for an offense that wants to run a lot more 11 personnel, that was important. it was very important to kind of get that type of, okay, now we're there. We've restocked it. But it's not just about numbers, Trevor. You can't sign 5 Brayden Robinsons and Bubba Frazier's. You need to find the right fits. You know, you've got sort of that possession guy in Devin Fitzgerald. You've got 2 guys that are kind of do a little bit of everything in Caden Finley and Dylan Faison, although Caden Finley can do even more because he can also play the boundary. You've got a really dynamic, you know, pass catcher, ball, you know, a playmaker with the ball in his hands, and Bubba Frazier, who can also be a really good route runner. And then Brayden Robinson brings you just a lot of electricity and can use a lot of different ways. And I would say that Bubba and Brayden are a lot alike, but there's also some unique aspects to their games that can allow you to play them together if they prove themselves. So like if they're 2 of your 3 best receivers, you don't have to necessarily pigeonhole them in the same spot because of the ball skills that they both bring to the table. There's a world in which I could see Bubba Frazier playing Z and Brayden Robinson playing the slot, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're not going to run a lot of jump balls out of this look, but we're going to run a lot of stuff where we're just going to outrun you. And in some ways, it reminds me a lot of the 2020 Alabama receiver room. I'm not trying to say anyone is Devontae Smith, but remember, that wasn't a very good group, big group either. You know, when you look at that, you had, you know, Devontae Smith was like 6 feet tall and about like 170 pounds. You know, you had, was it Slade Bolden, right? He was on the smaller side. He was 5'11", 190 pounds. And then your quote unquote big guy on that class or on that receiving core was John Mechie, who was 5'11" or 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot, 195. They didn't have any problems throwing the ball down the field.
No,
because they were great route runners. They could do different things. And so this group's a little shorter than that, but it gives you some of those same vibes where it's like, well, you know, yeah, I'm not going to run a lot of back shoulder one-on-ones, but you're not going to be able to catch me on a cross or a slant and over a post, you know, a dig, things like that. You're just not going to be able to run with us. Yeah. And so there's a lot of uniqueness to this group in the 5. It's not 5 cookie cutters. Then obviously Brayden Robinson adds a great production, great football IQ, dynamic athlete, 10-400 meter dash, and from a state that you really, really, really want to make a bigger part of what you're trying to do. So it's a really nice cherry on top for this Notre Dame wide receiver class.
Well, Brian, I don't know. Well, I do know about you too, but I'm ready to jump into the film to really see how Brayden Robinson's going to fit on the field in this Notre Dame offense, because he brings a lot of elite tools to the table when it comes to his on the field play.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, we're going to dive into the film here real quick, Trev. But one of the things to look for in this film is the first thing you're going to look at is he's not big. He's a small F. I mean, he's listed at 5'9". Seeing him next to Javion Osborne, I don't know that he's 5'9". Let's just get that out of the way right away. You're going to see that he's got shorter legs. He's not like a really, you know, gangly type of guy. He's got that short, stout build. But what you're also going to see is this is not just a great athlete playing football. What you're going to see on film here, Trevor, is this is a kid that knows how to play football. And that's something that I like to watch on this film. So as we kind of dive into that, just kind of keep that in mind. That's one thing that I really like about him is he knows how to play the position. He's not just a great athlete. You know, there's a lot of kids that are like him. They're just elite athletes, and you can't run with them in high school, but they don't know how to play the position. So they get to college and their lack of size becomes a major hindrance. And that was honestly my biggest hang up. It's look at him. That's not 5'9", in my opinion. Like, and you have to be willing to kind of have that conversation of like, okay, the kid's a great high school player, but does it project? Does it project to the next level? And that's kind of the question.
Well, and that's a conversation that we've had a lot this weekend on this show is, look, you set aside like competition is a big question mark. And I kind of file that under this same conversation. If he has the tools, great football IQ, great speed, great agility, great balance, and all the things you're going to see on this kid's film, I think a lot of the other things kind of start to fill in for themselves. You're going to see that a lot with Brayden Robinson on film.
Well, but once you get past the size, this is what you see right here. I mean, he just explodes by guys. You see this constantly. on his film where this safety thinks, no, I'm in position to open up and run with this guy. And then he realizes, nope, no, I'm not. I mean, he just blows past guys. It's not even like it, but this is another example right here. Like I would like for him to be a little bit like he gets to his post a little bit quickly here. I think he can push this route a little bit more. I'd like to see him snap it off a little bit, but you see him kind of leaning outside a little bit. He understands this guy's playing me outside leverage, right? At the snap, this guy sinks outside. Watch the corner. So at the snap, this guy looks like he's a little bit inside of Brayden, right? You see that? So let's get to that here. So right here, it looks to me right here that this corner is playing inside of Brayden. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Then at the snap, he sinks outside. So what does Brayden do? He initially steps inside. Guy widens, so he widens a little bit and then beats him over the post. Now, a kid like him doesn't necessarily have to be as sharp as on his top ends because he can just outrun you. But I'd still like for him to do that because there will be some 4-4 corners that he's going to go against a college. But overall, he has a grasp of what he's doing. He runs the ball. He tracks the deep ball extremely well, Trev, and just very well. But this is also something you see is because he's small, he's not an easy target. I mean, this guy just whiffs on him. He's really not an easy target, and he can, he just quickly make people miss. There's a lot of suddenness to his game.
Yes.
There's a lot of quickness to his game that I like as well, which makes him not, because like here's the danger. If he's just a vertical player, just a go post deep over guy at his size, he's going to get covered by good teams. If that's all he can do. You want a guy that can do damage with the ball in his hands, and that's the other element that Brayden brings to the table. So he can literally beat you in every aspect of the field. That's that play we just saw where he just makes that, oh, no, that's a different play where he embarrasses a guy on the sideline. Look at him be able to stay in bounds on that
great balance,
play.
Great feet. Very
and he's
shifty.
A strong kid, too.
Yes. That's the one underrated part of his game that I'm glad that you brought up is a lot of people associate being 5'8", 5'9", $160 with not being a strong kid.
He's built really well.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a little bit of running back to his build. That's the one thing when you do see him next to Javian Osborne, like, dude, they're built very similarly. Javian's taller, but they're built very similarly. But at the end of the day, Trev, I mean, this is really what it comes down to. Look at this acceleration. I mean, you can't run with him. I mean, it's really hard to run with him. I love this.
Good hustle play.
Yeah. And just catches the guy. It's like, nah, you're not taking that one back, buddy. Yep.
Okay. Good
Competes. He's competitive. Like, again, you see the strength. He can do things with the ball in his hands. This is get him the ball in space. But he's not like just out there juking all day just to make cuts. He runs with purpose. He runs with intentionality. He's saying, look, let me find grass. Let me find green. Let me find that open area and then go hit it. And like, he has no business getting this many yards on this play. But the safety thinks he's got an angle on him, and he probably does for 99% of players he played against in high school. But he's just so fast that he just gets to those holes a lot quicker than other receivers, and that's one of the things that makes him very dangerous. Fast guys like that, you think you've got him. You think you got the I've got the angle, but you don't, and that's what's really impressive by what Brayden brings to the table as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Look at his body control. Like he's not going to make his living on winning jump balls. He's just not. He's 5'9", but he has a better catch radius than your typical 5'9" or shorter guy because he does have really good body control. He's got good hands. Doesn't have super long arms, but this is a really nice grab right here. This is not a great ball, but he makes a tough grab. Again, I don't know that I want to make a living throwing the ball to a 5'7" to 5'8", 9 guy, just because if you miss it all, could be picked. But he makes that really tough catch. Here's another example. Look at the acceleration coming out of this. He gets off the line quickly. Trev, what I love about this class, and it's true of Bubba Frazier, it's true of Caden Finley, it's true at times of Dylan Faison, and it's true of Brayden Robinson. I am looking forward to the day where I don't have to complain about a lack of urgency off the line from wide receivers at Notre Dame, because all these kids play with great urgency off the line. Look at this one, for example, this play coming up. He's trying to eat up your cushion as quickly as possible and just flies off the line. And then once he gets a step on you, you're toast. You can't run with him. and then just accelerates. Not a great ball. Ball's thrown behind him. He shows, look at his ability to stop and go back and catch that football. That is not an easy catch, Trev.
No.
That is, in fact, an extremely hard catch to make. But he makes it and stays up, breaks the tackle, and then, gets it in the end zone. Look at this, though. Look how much separation he has against this corner. When just a little stop route, 7-8 yard stop route. I'd say I want to see him push that route a little bit deeper. But look at that. Why is that guy freaking out? Well, I know I'm a fast guy, but look what the route. It's a go. He's selling go route off the line. Like, that looks like a go route. And then he snaps it off at the end. Boom, slams it down, and he's coming back to the football. So that's some really good stuff right there.
One of the plays that stuck out to me on his film, it was actually on his not contested catch, but the catch where he had great body control, caught it over the middle. He recognized early in his route that it was zone. And with somebody this fast, sometimes you can kind of overshoot the hole in the zone that you're looking for. Recognized it, settled down behind him. The ball wasn't perfect, but he went up and made the grab. It's a good IQ play, too.
Another contested catch. Strong kid. Definitely a strong kid. Here he is with the ball in his hands. You see the ability, the acceleration, and just gets that corner. Oh, barely gets tripped up. Good balance. Attacks the ball well. He's not he's not a body catcher, excuse me. He's a good hands catcher. Look at this balance. That's what you were about earlier, Trev, that ability to stay up. And then he's going to fight. He's going to fight for every yard. I mean, he's still a $160. So it's not like he's going to be out there looking like, Jonas Walton, the ball in his hands. But he battles, though, Trev. That's the whole point. He competes. I love this patience. This guy's playing off of him. He's trying. So this is talk about another football IQ play. So let's walk through this route. Where's the corner? So right now you've got Javion right, or you've got Brayden right here in the corner right here. That is clear inside leverage. So this guy right here, you see the safety right here. Look, he's kind of staying down on a slot. So what he's basically saying, I'm not giving up an inside route. You're not going to run a slant on me. They must have seen on film a lot of slants, a lot of posts, a lot of crossers. This guy's faster than me, plus the coverage technique. I'm taking away the slant. So what the corner's hoping for is that by taking away the inside move, that Brayden's just going to release outside and then he can just open up and run with him. Well, Brayden's got to kind of counter that. So if he's trying to take away the inside, I need to some way try to influence him to get him to bite inside so I can then get separation to the outside. So when you see this right here, he's coming off, and when a receiver's doing this, he's now got you in a two-way go type of situation because he's been able to kind of stem you up, get on you, but he's able to kind of get that guy to freeze just enough with that top end, and he could even do a better job of that, but that inside move, just enough to get that guy to freeze to give him the leverage to get outside, but also times the play well, because if he gets outside too soon, that guy's going to recover, and then he's going to be able to push him out of bounds, and he can't make that catch. So just another example of just understanding how to play the game. Look at that. That's a real tough catch right there. Again, guys playing inside leverage, trying to take that slant away. He stops. Quarterback puts the ball where it needs to get to, and he makes a tough catch. This is a bigger corner. Look at that suddenness. Like, just look at him slam the hips down. Just boom, he's out of his break fast. Great catch, Trev.
Yeah, great catch. Strong hands on a corner that has clear, visible size.
Yes.
On him. I mean, look at that.
Great route. Sells that go, snaps that thing off really impressively, and makes a tough catch. Real tough catch. That's what's so impressive about him, Trevor. It's like he doesn't have a bunch of touchdowns where he's just catching 2-yard routes and just outrunning people. Like, he's stretching the field, he's running routes, he's winning contested catches. Like, he's scoring in a lot of different ways. And then you look at that. That's that balance we talk about. I mean, this should be a tackle. It's a poor tackle by the defender, but that's a tough. He's not a big target. That's the thing. He's not a big target.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of him to hit. Like, Audric Estimate's a big target. It's like Malachi Fields is going to be a big target. He is not. He is definitely not.
When he gets his shoulder square and plants his foot in the ground, he goes too.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Just real good route skills. Just tough catcher. Just plays bigger than his size. It's a really cliche thing to say, but it's also true. that strength, that competitiveness allows him to really maximize his skill set. And he's got the tools. Like, look, if a guy's going to be 5'9" or shorter, you better hope that he's got some traits to overcome that. And Brayden's got all speed, explosiveness, suddenness, toughness, strength, competitiveness, football IQ, and a little bit of swagger.
Yeah.
You know, he plays with a little bit of something, and he brings a lot of tools to the table. A lot of tools to the table, Trev.
You see him a little bit here down in goal line situations, running underneath routes. Is that pretty similar to what we could see from him in the Notre Dame offense?
Yeah, in the red zone, yes. Yeah, you're certainly going to see it. I'm sorry, this burst right here, though. Look at him crease the defense here. But, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that suddenness is going to allow him to kind of win. And we saw Notre Dame run these routes a lot. Like, you think about that fourth down play. I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it the one to Jade Thomas where they ran basically like a reverse pivot route, and they broke it inside, went inside, and then broke it outside? You think of the route that Jaden Greathouse beat Ohio State on. It was kind of like he's running a slide route, then kind of does a reverse pivot, works back inside. Actually, the first one was a pivot route because it went outside. This is a reverse pivot route where it goes inside, and that separation that Jaden Greathouse got, then you get the ball in space. Now it's about making Caleb Downs miss. Well, that's a kind of route you want it. Like, you know what I'm talking about? The touchdown where he makes Caleb. That's a route you're going to love to get the ball to Brayden Robinson to do. Like, just getting the ball in space and say, okay, can your safety tackle me or not? And a lot of times it's going to be or not. And then once he gets that speed, he's going to be a hard guy to catch. But yeah, those little quick game things, those double moves, the sudden moves, the pivots, the reverse pivots, the slant and goes, the hitch routes, the hitch and goes, you know, crossers, things like that. Those are all things that he's going to make his living on at Notre Dame. No question about it. Right, and somebody in the chat, fighting Mike 87 just made a comment that, and he's absolutely spot on. He goes, you know, like it's, and we talk about this. It's track speed versus football speed, and a lot of guys have, you know, they have track speed, but you know, can they play football? And you know, I'm going to bring up some, by the way, some spring highlights for this past spring, so people can watch it while we're still talking about it. But Brayden Robinson has track speed, but he's a football player. He's not a track guy learning to play football. He is a football player with track speed. That's the difference. Like, look at that little sudden move. Like, he's trying to sell, I'm running a curl route here. You're like, well, that's a little bit of a choppy route, right? Well, no, he's trying to sell something different. Did I miss that play? I think I missed. I didn't go back far enough. Watch this route, though. Like, it looks kind of choppy, but that's a stop and go, basically. And he gets that corner to bite. Once that corner stops his feet, he's toast. It's over. You know, quarterback gets the ball out there, he outruns a guy, and he runs under the ball and tracks it extremely well. So that's that kind of thing that you really like. And this is another instinctive play. I don't like – he's trying to go underneath that guy, but the corner does a really nice job of not letting him get inside. He takes that inside angle away. So what does Brayden do? He instinctively goes over top. Quarterback sees it, reads it, knows where to throw the ball, and then Brayden goes up and gets it. So just that smarts for the game. We can get carried away with the speed and focusing on the speed and the playmaking and all that stuff. And there's good reason to be excited about that.
Yeah.
But this is also a kid that, and it's something that we talk a lot about with like Mike Mickens. It's clear that Mike Brown's putting a lot of emphasis in that as well. Hey, I want guys to know how to play the game. It's not just enough to be a dynamic athlete. I need to know that you know how to play the game and that you're a thinker. I want you to be a thinker. And then if you get thinkers that are also 4-3, 4-4 guys, then you've got something special.
You can have all the track speed in the world that you want, but if you don't know how to use it on the football field, it's a tough spot to be in. I can't get over how good this kid's hips are.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to pull up that website that I have, Trev. I'm trying to find it. The running calculator. There's this thing that I have, this website I go to where it kind of, you type in 100-meter dash time and it tries to convert to you what a kid normally like that'll run. And his best 400-meter dash time is a 10.44, which translates to a 4.35. And then I've also seen him a lot more in the 10.5 range. That's a 4.4 flat type of speed. And so that just kind of, like I said, that kind of you see an idea of just how fast he is in those regards. So, again, he's short. Those aren't super long arms, but he knows how to play the game. I want to see on that particular one. I'd like to see him tack the ball, just step to the ball a little bit at the end. there instead of like waiting on it. Like that's one thing I do think at times on some of these stop and curl routes, he will wait for the ball a little bit. I want to see him just last second step to the football, because the reason why is the DB is running to where your body is to squeeze off the football. So like, for example, on this play, the DB is going to try to inside out you. If he hits a Division I DB, and Notre Dame DB is going to play this one a lot better. You don't want to give him that leverage to get in between you and the football. So step to the ball at the last second and attack it, and I'll feel even better about, you know, his ability to catch that ball, to where now the guy's got to run through you instead of having the chance to cut you off. I mean, some of the safeties that Notre Dame's going to be recruiting, and Jadon Blair and Joey O'Brien, they're going to be able to, if they get their hands in front of you, the ball's incomplete. It is. You've got to make them come through you. And that way you're either catching it or getting a PI. That's just one of those little things that he can improve upon. But overall, he's got a pretty sound game. Like, he's a pretty sound, fundamentally sound, technically sound. I mean, he's a coach's kid, Trev, and he plays like a coach's kid. He's smart, you know, and he knows how to play. And you like guys like that, especially when they run 4.3s. You know what I mean? Kind of like that.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Some of those close-ups of him running one-on-one routes too, you weren't kidding. He's put together pretty well.
Yeah, he's built really well, Trev. He is not like I've heard some people say, you know, oh, a comp for him is Tutu Atwell. So height-wise, sure, he's already much thicker than Tutu Atwell. I really think the comp that I like best for him is, and I can't remember who said it. Somebody in the chat said it last week, so I'm not taking original credit for this comp, but I hadn't really thought of a comp yet for him other than, like, I had a Notre Dame comp. I think he's a great CJ Sanders comp, because at the very least, when I look at Brayden Robinson, I kind of feel like at the very least he's going to have a CJ Sanders type career. You know, solid slot guy at times, but a really dynamic return man. But when I started thinking about, like, okay, what's national comps? I hadn't really got there yet. But somebody in the chat last week, when we were talking about receivers, mentioned Rondale Moore from Purdue. And I think that's a great comp, because Rondale Moore was built more like Brayden Robinson than Tutu, because Tutu was small. I mean, Tutu Atwell, I think, if I remember the combine, he was like in the 140s. If I remember at the NFL scouting combine, yeah, Tutu was listed at the combine at 5'9" and a $155. And I think maybe it was his pro day. There was one of the events where, you remember going in that draft, where people were freaking out about how he weighed in the 140s. And there was some freaking out to be done there, but he's already thicker than Tutu Atwell. And I think that's why I really like that. And I can't remember who came up with that one, who came up with the Rondale Moore comp, but I think that's a really good one, because Rondale was a little thicker. Rondale was 5'7", $180. I mean, he was a stocky guy, and I think Brayden's probably a little closer to Rondale in height. He might actually be maybe a touch taller than Rondale, but very similar. And then obviously that Rondale was a burner, just like Tutu was a burner. But Rondale was that guy that was really dynamic with the ball in his hands. I mean, he could just get the ball in so many different ways, and was just an elite pass catcher, and beyond what you'd expect from someone his size. I mean, if you think about it, Trev, at the combine, he measured in at 5'7", $181 with 28.25-inch arms. Those are really short arms for a Division I football player, at no matter what your size is. But yet, in his one healthy year at Purdue, had 114 catches for 1,258 yards and 12 touchdowns. Also carried the ball 21 times for 213 yards. So I think that's a good comp, very good comp for Brayden Robinson. But yeah, the film is fun to watch. Yeah. It's really fun to watch.
It sure is. Well, Brian, let's tie a bow on this commitment and talk about just what's next, big picture, because I'm sure they're done recruiting offensive players. On offense, they're done. But now, big picture, I believe there's still 2 big recruitments left on the board that have yet to commit. So what's next for this Notre Dame recruiting staff?
Well, when you look at the 2026 class, we'll just kind of do that, and then we'll finish up with some wide receivers. So just looking at the 2026 class. 5 days from now, we're going to get an announcement from Nicholas Reddish of where he's going to go. And it's either going to be Notre Dame, or Virginia Tech. And I know that he's got some other schools listed. I believe he has, I think Indiana's listed. Can you pull up his top 5? I think Indiana's listed. I know Virginia Tech is listed. I know Notre Dame is listed. And there's 2 other schools on there, and I can't remember his 2 other schools because it's really Notre Dame and Virginia Tech where his older brother goes. His older brother goes to Virginia Tech. And so he's going to decide. That's what Notre Dame is hoping. They're hoping to get Nicholas Reddish to cap off the secondary class. Then, of course, well, I would argue the biggest commitment, the biggest recruit left on the board is obviously Elijah Golden, who makes he'll make his decision known on July 26th. As of today, I don't believe that Elijah has made a decision. I have not got any indication that he's made a decision. Obviously, Notre Dame has done very well. They finished things off at the visit very well. Bama has not given up on him either. Oklahoma and Virginia Tech have not given up on him either. I do think it's a Notre Dame-Bama battle mostly right now, and they would love to cap those 2 kids off. I mean, and they're in a position now, Trev, where if they get those 2 guys, they will have literally landed every kid that visited in June except for 1 kid who they basically backed off of after they landed Ian Premer. I've never seen anything like that before. Just a literal inside straight. But those are the 2 guys that are left. Now, Trev, 2027 recruiting. Now, this is where Mike Brown now gets to turn all of his attention to the 2027 class. And it's a pretty good offer list so far. I mean, you've got some talented players on the board. They're still recruiting Jameer Brown and Khalil Taylor, who are committed to Ohio State and Penn State. Notre Dame recently offered Khalil Taylor. He has said his recruitment shut down, but I'm believe based on some things I've been told that he's still talking to Notre Dame and some other schools. Jameer Brown said he's solid to Ohio State, and I tend to think Jameer Brown is going to be very hard to get out of Ohio. I mean, he's an Ohio State kid, committed to Ohio State, but he keeps listening to Notre Dame. And if the shoes were reversed, if the roles were reversed, the shoe was on the other foot. I just did put 2 of those together. If the shoes were reversed, if the roles were reversed, or the shoe was on the other foot, and he was committed to Notre Dame but kept talking to Ohio State, we'd all be kind of in like panic mode a little bit. But I think he's going to be a very tough pull. Those are 2 committed players everywhere else. The uncommitted guys thereafter, and really the 2 biggest guys on the board for Notre Dame are Julius Jones Jr. and Quentin Burrell. Those are the 2 studs. I know Notre Dame fans love to talk about Manchin Sales. He's an in-state kid. He's not really an in-state kid. He's more of a Southern kid who's kind of moved to Indiana, from what I understand. He has very little interest in Notre Dame. Notre Dame is really pushing for Julius Jones Jr., who's in my opinion, a 5-star player already as a sophomore. Quentin Burrell's a top 50 national player who's from Chicago, Mount Carmel. He's been on campus a bunch. Talked to Brian Smith, who was down at the Future 50 event where Julius Jones Jr. dominated. Obviously, he's got great relationships with Oregon and other staffs, but he also likes Notre Dame a lot. Long way to go on that one. Notre Dame has a lot of work to do, but there is interest there from Julius Jones Jr., and they're going to have to recruit him for who he is, not, hey, your dad went here. They're not going to get any dad went there bumps with Julius Jones Jr. They're going to have to recruit him and show him that, no, we're the best fit for you. Notre Dame may have been the best fit for your dad, but we need to show you that we're the best fit for you. That's obviously going to be a big one. And then Quentin Burrell, same thing. I mean, he's getting recruited by teams all over the country. Yeah, he's from Chicago, but that's not going to be an easy win. They're going to have to recruit him really hard. And I like where they are early with those 2 players, and I expect the board to continue to grow. There's some other players that they're after. Sonny Gales is a kid that they've talked to. Anthony Roberts is a kid we've heard associated with them. Zeke Sidney's a kid they're trying to get involved with there as well. So, and then I expect the board to continue to expand. But really the 2 names on the board for me that it's just like you got to get both of them is, now that you got this big class here, you don't have to focus on numbers as much like we talked about the other night with the 27 class. If you can just get Quentin Burrell and Julius Jones Jr., if they decided we're good, I'd say, all right. I mean, I think that's the key to get those 2 studs, big-time players, to go with this class is ultimately the ideal situation. And I hate to say that, like, must get this early in the process, but when you consider one player goes to St. Thomas Aquinas, private school, great student, dad played at Notre Dame, you got to win that battle. and the other kid is a Chicago kid that plays at Mount Carmel. You got to win that battle. And they're both Notre Dame kids in that they fit Notre Dame. They're smart. They're I don't know either kid. Everyone that I talk to that knows them, they're great kids. They're hard workers. They've got great attitudes. They're not your typical 5-star receiver. They're not. They're fits at Notre Dame. You got to convince them of that. And so it's a lot of pressure early on, but you got to get at least one of them. And ideally you get 2 of them. But now, and we're here at July 6th, and now all your attention can go to that class, and especially those 2 players. So that's really where it's at for this 2027 class, because now, Trev, you're done in 2026. Now, let me say one other thing. Schools are not going to stop recruiting Caden Finley and Bubba Frazier and Dylan Faison. I mean, Miami's still trying to get him to come for an official visit. They're not going to stop recruiting Devin Fitzgerald, and they're not going to stop recruiting Brayden Robinson. So you still have work to do there, but it's a lot easier to maintain that than to still expand your board. When it comes to recruiting uncommitted players, they can now focus a lot of their time on going and getting the studs in 2027.
With the way that they recruited this class, it allows them, you guys said it yesterday, it allows them to go big game hunting in 2027. And I'm very much looking forward to that ride, if this year was any inclination of what's to come. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for our recap of the commitment of Brayden Robinson. Again, 4-star wide receiver out of Red Oaks, Texas. Brian and Sean will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for RTCF. Then Brian and I will be back again on Tuesday to continue with some position previews, opponent previews. I believe we have Notre Dame's 5th opponent coming up on Tuesday.
No, it's going to be number 6. So we'll do tight ends, and then we're going to have NC State, because we did Boise State last week. Boise's number 5, so we'll have NC State coming up here this week.
Love it. And a lot of people think NC State's going to be the trap game, so we're in for a fun show on Tuesday.
A lot of people are smart to think that.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. But before you head out of here today, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, and whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So for Brian, I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
And my mom and dad are also traveling. They're driving back home to Virginia today. So thinking about y'all, praying for y'all. Have safe travels. We love you, and hope you guys enjoyed the show. Take care, everybody.